Good evening, and welcome to Fat Woman Reads. Today's story is one from Thai Folk Tales. I confess I've never read these, so I don't know how good they are. Shall we? The story of Pra Law, or The Love of Two Women. This is the story of a very distant past. People still believe that it is a true story, and that the towns where the hero and his two lovers lived are now in the vicinity of Prai and Nan in the north of Thailand. At the time, they were two rival municipalities, Muang Song and Muang Sorn. They were two independent countries. The prince of Muang Song had designs upon his neighbor and wanted to annex the latter country. Hence, there was irreconcilable enmity which existed between the two countries and which barred the path of love between their children. The prince of Muang Song raised an army and attacked Muang Song. In a battle which followed, he killed the prince of Muang Song, but unable to take the town, even after that, he withdrew to his country. The widow of the prince of Muang Song was quite something I don't see on this page, embittered, and swore perpetual vengeance to the royal family of Muang Song. Years went by. The prince of Muang Song had a son called Pra Law, who after his father's death ruled after him. Pra Law was known far and wide for being a very handsome prince. Now the prince of Muang Sorng had a cousin who ruled after him called Thao Pichai. He married a beautiful princess called Dharavati. They had two daughters called Pra Huan and Pra Pang, who grew up in years into two very beautiful ladies. Having heard of the handsome Pra Law, their neighbor, they fell secretly in love with him and wanted to marry him. In olden days, princes could take two or several wives at the same time. Not knowing what to do, the two princesses took their two governesses into their confidence. The two governesses, Nang Ren and Nang Roy, who had looked after the two princesses very closely for a long time, felt great sympathy for them and volunteered to help them. They sent singers to Muang Song. The singers wandered about the town and sang of the rare beauty of the two princesses of Muang Song, whose beauty they described as unsurpassed by any woman all around far and wide. Pra Law heard this and had the singers called to his palace, where they were made to give more details of the two princesses. Pra Law got interested and wanted very much to marry the two princesses of Muang Song, but how to do it he could not think. While he was still thinking of how to marry the two princesses, the governesses went much further to find a way of tying up the heart of the prince of Muang Song in an unescapable spell of love. In those days, people believed in magic, and that magicians had power over spirits and the elements. People nowadays are degenerated and wicked, that the gods no longer entrusted magic arts to men. The great magician of Muang Song, called Pu Chao, was known for his great powers, and he lived in the deep of a great forest surrounded by wild beasts and evil spirits, so that he could stay in solitude, devoting to the pursuit of his sacred meditation and holy rites, undisturbed by men. Nevertheless, Nang Ruen and Nang Roy risked all this danger to seek out the holy magician. Seeing that his princesses were in great distress, the holy man was ready to help, and he made a love philter, invoking a spirit to carry it to the court of Pra Law and leave it among his food. Pra Law took the philter along with his food, and thus he was doomed. Since then, an irresistible force was perpetually drawing him away toward the two princesses. He dreamt of them. He pined for their love. He could no longer eat. His mother was very sad when she saw this, and when Pra Law said that he must go to Muang Sorn, she tried to dissuade him from doing so. She said it could not be done by risking his life in going to an enemy country. He would soon be found out and killed. Pra Law would hear none of this, and his mother had to give in at last. Pra Law went with his two very entrusted men, Nai Kiao and Nai Quan. They arrived at Kalong River, which was the boundary between the two countries. There, they left the army behind and crossed the boundary disguised as merchants. When Pu Chao heard that Pra Law and his two entrusted men arrived at Muang Sorn frontier, he sent a magic cock to meet Pra Law. The cock was so beautiful, and Pra Law wanted to capture it, but the cock was too quick for him and ran away from them further and further towards the capital of Muang Sorn, with the three men always following it. When they arrived at a village near to Muang Sorn, the cock disappeared from sight. They spent that day in the village, that night in the village, and arrived in the town the next day. They then went into the palace garden, where they asked permission from the keeper of the royal garden to stay the night at a small pavilion inside the garden. Nang Ren and Nang Roy heard that Pralaw had arrived. They came into the garden and took a bath in the lotus pond, so as to give the opportunity to Pralaw to approach them. Nai Kiao and Nai Quan happened to take a dip in the pond at the same time. When they saw the two beautiful attendants of the princesses, they approached them and made courtship to them. The two women were already waiting this chance to get news of Pralaw, so they did not hesitate long to respond. First, they pretended to be angry, as all beautiful women would at the first start, and told them that as intruders to the royal domain they would be captured and put to death. Nai Kiao and Nai Quan asked for mercy, saying that they were just simple merchants who had come from far away in order to seek a chance of making money, and therefore could not be held responsible for not knowing of this custom. Nang Ren and Nang Roy knew that the two men were lying to them. They did not look like merchants in any way. Their complexion was not sunburnt, and it betrayed of men who were surrounded by luxuries. Nang Ren and Nang Roy then said if they were merchants, where were their goods, and they would like to see them. Kiao and Quan had to confess at last, and took them into confidence that they came with the Prince of Wangsong, who would like to have an opportunity of seeing the two princesses. Finding this, the two women asked to go with the two men to pay respect to the Prince of Wangsong, who was hiding in the garden. The two women thought of a way of bringing the two princesses to Pralaw, and asked the latter to wait there. When the princesses heard that Pralaw was already in the garden, they pined to come out, but as young girls they were under strict surveillance of the grand aunt, the dowager princess of Wangsong, whose husband was killed in a battle by Pralaw's father. The two princesses went to see the grand aunt, and while massaging her asked for her permission to go for a walk in the royal garden. You know, grand aunt, just eating, sitting, and sleeping in the palace without any exercises is bad. Our heads are dull, and we long for fresh air and a good stretch of our legs. The grand aunt willingly agreed, and they had to go to the garden with a long retinue of attendants. But when they arrived in the garden, Nang Wen and Nang Roy told the attendants to go about and enjoy themselves anywhere, but not to come near the pavilion and disturb the princesses while they were having a rest and sleep. The attendants, of course, were very glad to have a free day off. You can help. Nang Ren and Nang Roy brought the two princesses to the pavilion. Pralaw was hidden in a room inside, and was watching from behind a curtain. While the two governesses talked and the two princesses queried as how they should act or do at the meeting with Pralaw, the latter found it to be amusing and broke in. The princesses were very much abashed, but at the same time struck by the beauty of Pralaw. The latter was also dazed by their loveliness. The princesses were more beautiful than any words could describe. Then followed words of greetings between the princes. It was not very difficult for them to become familiar with each other. Their hearts were already one before they met. At this instant, Kiao and Quan made signs to the two women to withdraw to the outer room, each pair staying quite separate in one corner. It was therefore not very long before Pralaw had the two princesses as wives, and the three loved each other so much that they no longer wanted to part with each other. Nang Ren and Nang Roy also became wives of Nai Kiao and Nai Quan in the outer room, both in their corners. The four vowed perpetual love to each other and fidelity to the royal masters, wherever that might happen. Whatever might happen. I knew there was something wrong with that. When the day was far advanced and it was time to think of returning to the palace, the six came together and thought of how they could take the prince into the royal palace and how to keep the matter secret. Nang Ren and Nang Roy said they would go back with the princesses first. When it was dark, they would come out again and smuggle the three men disguised as their female relatives into the palace. They then called all the attendants strolling about in the garden together and went back to the palace. At night, the three men were secretly brought into the inner chambers of the princesses as planned. That night, Pralaw was joined to the princesses on the same royal bed and shared perfect happiness with them. The princesses never came out of the room anymore, but had all the food and everything brought into their chambers only by Nang Ren and Nang Roy. This went on a long while until both princesses were conceiving. The attendants began to whisper and want to tell the parents, Prince Pichai and Princess Dharavati. Something must have gone wrong, they said, because the princesses never came out of their rooms, and they ate a lot more than usual. The royal parents came at night when they were all asleep together in the same bed. The two princesses were on each side of Pra-Law. They looked a long time at the three in the bed. They just wondered who was this man, so handsome and so dignified. The princesses woke up and saw the parents. They jumped from the bed and fell at their feet. So also did Pra-Law. The princesses asked for forgiveness from the parents and told them who was Pra-Law. Seeing that Pra-Law was of royal blood and therefore their equal, instead of being angry, he was gratified and thought that he would be a good husband for their daughters. They therefore gave them blessings and said that they would arrange for their wedding ceremony the next day. As Miss Luck would have it, another group of maids went to tell the grand aunt at the same time. The latter was quite enraged when she heard that the enemy's son was in the midst of her palace. She ordered the royal guards to go forward and take Pra-Law, dead or alive, as he must be killed forthwith. The royal guards surrounded the palace of the princesses. Nang Ren and Nang Roy saw this and went in to warn everybody to be on guard. The two princesses at once said they would fight by the side of Pra-Law to death and would not accept any advice from the latter to hold aloof. Kiao and Quan, together with Ren and Roy, decided to defend their masters. The royal guards shot in and advanced toward the small group of 7 people inside. Serious fighting took place. They fought very bravely until all the 4 attendants of the princes were cut down on top of each other one by one. Now it was the turn of the 3 princes. They leant against each other's back, turning toward the 3 corners facing the royal guards. Arrows flew towards them in quicker and quicker succession until they were all fixed together by the arrows, dead but still standing. The parents had heard the scuffle and hurried to the scene with the men, but alas, they came too late. Their children were already dead. In a wrath, they ordered the men who killed their children to be all ruthlessly executed. They also ordered the grand aunt to be dragged to the scene and then put to her death. After this, there was a cremation ceremony for the 3 princes. The mother of Pra-Law was also invited, and she came. In a common grief over their children, they had forgotten their old feud and had now united together once again in great friendship.